Almost every narrative shares 4 basic things. What if you took those things away? Would it still be a story, and would it still be compelling?
For example, what if you had a story that didn't have characters? Off the bat, this would completely change how a story would work, because you almost always have a protagonist and an antagonist, side characters, character arcs where they change over time and they learn lessons. But when you think about what a story really is, all it is a recollection of something that happened. Things happen all the time that don't have characters at all. Really interesting things. Supernovas explode in space. They emit light that is some of the brightest in the entire universe. Why not tell a story about that? It doesn't have to be informative necessarily. It doesn't have to be a lesson. It can be entertaining. But here's the real question. If you have a story with no characters, would you still be able to feel the following emotions? Love, anger, fear. I'm having trouble imagining any kind of story where you would be able to feel any of these things without characters. But you could feel the following emotions: interest, curiosity. Oh God, that is a misspelling. Suspense, awe. And who is to say that these emotions right here are less powerful than these ones up here? Of course, most people would say love is the most beautiful, incredible emotion, and I would probably agree, given I have my wife right here. But these emotions right here are not to be left unrecognized. These are very powerful emotions. Just imagine for a second if we took the 50 best authors in the entire world and asked each of them to write a story that does not have a single character in it. What kind of interesting stuff would they come up with? You may have heard the saying about creativity that constraints are the mother of creativity. Like how low-budget films often introduce really cool new ideas into the world of cinema because they have to figure out new ways to tell an interesting story without having as much money as a big box studio. So that leads to new developments. Necessity is the mother of invention. So maybe you can get away without having characters, but
A theme. Certainly a story must have a theme. It has to teach you some kind of lesson, or at least feature some kind of philosophical idea, or an idea in general. But why? Who says? Sometimes things happen and there's no lesson to be learned from them. There's nothing to take back from them. They just happen. But would an absence of a theme make a story less entertaining? I wouldn't say so. It doesn't have to. If you really wanted to explore new ideas or learn new things, you would be knee deep in philosophy textbooks or any textbook. A lot of my favorite stories, I didn't really take anything back from them. I just liked them. I liked what happened. I love Family Guy. I don't learn fucking lessons from Family Guy. I'm not introduced to new things. Maybe I'd learn a new way to jerk off, but I guess the story does have to revolve around something. Even Family Guy episodes, they have something they revolve around, like Peter joins the mafia or something, but that might be more of a plot than a theme. So if you define a theme as the modicum around which a story spins, maybe you have to have a theme or else nothing would happen, because you have to have some kind of concept for something to happen. But if you define theme as a lesson that a story teaches or a philosophical idea, maybe it doesn't have to have one. Sometimes my wife Abby gives me the dirty drama of what happened at her workplace, and I find that shit very entertaining, but it doesn't teach me jack shit. It's just a fun story.
this next one might be impossible to be without. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Setting. If we define a story as a thing that happens, then that thing has to take place on some kind of planet somewhere or in the universe. This was supposed to be Earth. Whenever something happens, it has to happen in some kind of place. Is it even possible for a thing to happen that isn't happening in a place? The only thing I can think of is possibly in the 4th dimension or the 5th dimension, any kind of other dimension that we don't understand. Like if there's some kind of scientific shit we just don't know about, then maybe it would be possible for a thing to happen outside of a place. But if you ask me, a story can't really take place without a setting. But just because a thing has to happen in a place doesn't mean that we have to address the place. Think about something like a World War II movie. This kind of movie would have to be all about the setting because it was a specific time, a specific place. There's no ignoring it. It's a period piece. Think about a movie like maybe Saw. I don't really like Saw, saw, but this movie doesn't really need to take place at a certain time or in a certain place. I guess it would have to take place in Earth because Earth is the only place that has saws to my knowledge, but it's not as important. And if you go down and down the scale of importance for setting, you might get to a place where you don't need to describe when the movie took place and where it took place. Things that can happen that are interesting without any need for a location or a time, in my opinion. It's possible. I've never seen it happen, or at least I don't think so, but it's possible it has to be. What would that story look like? What would it revolve around? I have no clue. Maybe leave a little comment about an idea of what a story could be that did not have a setting.
Now we have the final boss, the plot. Theoretically, there is no way that a story could exist without a plot because they're basically synonyms. But there are rules of thumb that writers almost always use for the plot. Could they be foregone? It's the expedition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and what is it, Abby? The resolution? Now, you have a movie like Project Hail Mary that is an absolute emotional roller coaster. It has about 3 different rising actions, 3 different falling actions, bunch of climaxes. I loved the shit out of that movie. It sometimes feels a little manipulative to have so many roller coaster events. You kind of feel like you're being played a little bit. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because you kind of want to be manipulated when you're watching a movie or something. But does a story need to be an emotional roller coaster for it to encourage interest, curiosity? That kind of framework certainly helps, but is it necessary? I have no idea, and it kind of brings us back to the idea of necessity being the father of invention. If you had the constraint of no rising action, no falling action, whatever, what would you think of? What would come to your mind for an actual story? A story being defined as a recollection of things that happened. That's all a story is. This brings me to the big surprise that I mentioned in the beginning of the video. One of my big bucket list items in life is to write a novel. What I'm going to try to do with this novel is see how many of these rules I can break with a story still being interesting. It should be a story that is so incredibly alien when compared to other stories that it hardly is recognizable. It could end up being one of the most interesting stories that's ever been told, or it could end up insanely boring, but I'm going to give it a lot of effort to try to make it interesting. I have no idea what the premise is going to be, no idea what the concept will be, nothing. I would love to hear some comments about anything that you might think would work. I have been known to use ideas from the comments of my YouTube videos. I'll be making videos about this in the future, be able to see this develop, or you'll be able to see if I give up and fail miserably, which is equally as enjoyable to watch. But this is one of my favorite projects that I've taken on. I'm really excited to see where this goes and what doors it might open. My name is Luke and you have been watching Castles in the Air. This channel is called Castles in the Air because I have so many lofty goals and ambitions, including this one, that it feels like I'm building 30 different castles in the sky with no foundation at all. And with that, goodbye.